2021, just 1 year, nearly 1 in 10 homes in the U.S. were impacted by natural hazards. And many places with the highest climate risk in the U.S. are also seeing some of the highest growth.
When we ask home buyers and sellers directly, is climate change impacting your decision to buy a home, to move to a particular location? It's yes. The answer is yes. But then when
Well, you know, because this is, for the record, these guys, after all, climate change is fake. These guys made this in January 25th, 2023. That's how you know climate change is fake, because China had told them that they were going to use space lasers in Hawaii, and they were going to use hurricane lasers in Florida ahead of time.
when you look at the macro trends of where people are actually moving, they're moving into harm's way.
Here's the thing. A quick search for weather hazards in just about any geographic location will bring up news of disasters and dire predictions of worse to come. So how can we make informed decisions about where to live and how to manage risk? It turns out that even though some places will face far more hazards as the climate warms, identifying the riskiest
Low-key best places, ironically, are deep in the pocket of, you know, otherwise territories that Americans have made fun of, myself included, and considered uninhabitable. Anyway, but we won't talk about that. Let's continue.
Places in the future is really hard. Take Alexander Pishlaris as an example. In 2020, he was living in Portland, Oregon, and the wildfires and smoke of that summer got so bad that he decided to move to Florida. But when his car nearly flooded while driving through Miami Beach during heavy rain, he realized he hadn't escaped his weather woes.
Oh man, is it Duluth, Minnesota? Stop it. That's not a real place.
So we worked with some of the best minds in this space to help us sift through the data, find where hazards overlap. And
Oklahoma is not the best flyover state because Oklahoma, due to uninterrupted, unadulterated, pure fracking, has been able to do something incredibly unique, which is basically make the Turkish conspiracies of like an earthquake machine real. Also, Oklahoma has tremendous amounts of tornadoes, but one thing that you have to remember is that Oklahoma, literally, despite on top of having the tornadoes regularly, has insane earthquakes, like unprecedented earthquakes, because while fracking doesn't always cause earthquakes, it certainly does when they are positioned on fault lines in one particular region, specifically Oklahoma. It's not that fracking causes earthquakes all the time, everywhere, but if fault lines are aligned in a certain way, fracking does definitely cause earthquakes. Oklahoma is the example. Is 100% where this has happened.
and map out the riskiest places in the U.S. And stay with us to find out where we think the single riskiest place might be. As extreme weather increases all over the country, how do we figure out the riskiest places? First, let's look at the safest places. These are the safest 10% of counties in the U.S. based on projections of how climate will change.
What is this? We're literally making America Canada? What the hell's going on? Boo! 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 Boring. Boo! No! Boring! No! No! Nobody wants to live there!
By the middle of the century. As the humid climate niche characterized by mean annual temperatures around 55 degrees Fahrenheit moves north, some places that are particularly cold now might actually get safer because, as we know from previous episodes, the most deadly weather in the U.S. is extreme cold.
Bro, instead of like fighting new territorial wars with Russia on the North Pole or whatever, we should just invade Canada. Straight up. Like, why the fuck have we not invaded Canada yet? It's going to have so much more livable land that isn't like constantly fucking under snow.
This ProPublica study also lists the most dangerous U.S. counties, and we'll get to that in a bit. But first, let's add to our map mid-century projections for flood, storm, fire, drought, and heat risk. Starting with one of the most local hazards, flooding. This map shows the number of properties impacted by future floods due to rain, overflowing rivers, high tides, and storm surge. Many coastal towns will be impacted by rising sea levels, and places like West Virginia will be slammed with heavy rain as the
I don't get it. Just sell your house once it floods. Duh. I mean, you have insurance. You have flooding insurance, right? 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 Never mind. Let's continue.
climate warms. According to Redfin, by 2050, 84% of properties in Cape Coral, Florida, and 98% of properties in New Orleans will be at risk for flooding. Houston is also an outlier on this list due to the sheer number of properties at risk, as we saw when Hurricane Harvey submerged the city under its record-shattering rains in 2017. But what about storms? It seems like these extreme precipitation events are causing more and more damage as the climate warms. The top 10 cities impacted by storms are mostly in the Northeast, but Portland and Seattle, both infamously rainy cities, also appear here. Now let's look at fire. Here the map shifts dramatically to the west and southeast. This map shows the annual
Yeah, America's either underwater or on fire, okay? As you can see from this map, which is kind of fucked up because sometimes it's both. That's the double whammy when it's like both, where it's like if it's not wildfire season, it's flooding season.
Likelihood of wildfire in 2050. The places most at risk of devastating wildfires aren't cities, but instead houses and developments on the edge of wildlands and places with lots of fire. And it's not just forested areas that are at risk, but also the grass and shrublands of regions like the Great Basin, particularly places that are getting drier. Which brings us to drought. This map shows decreases in precipitation over the last 30 years compared to the 20th century.
Jesus
But what
Christ.
about the future? Well, here are the top 5 cities projected to be impacted by drought in 2050. 4 of them rely on water from the Colorado River, which is already in a decades-long drought, and large water use cuts in the basin are inevitable. Lastly, let's look at the second most common cause of weather-related deaths in the U.S., heat. This map shows projected days over 100 degrees in 2053. Oh man, Florida, Texas, and Arizona are looking pretty.
Bro, God literally is punishing. God is literally punishing you. If you are an evangelical Christian living in these areas, how do you not see that God hates you for everything that you've done? Okay? This is literally divine punishment. Like, at a certain point, if this is the type of shit that you believe in, you're like, oh, Bedlam, 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 Bedlam. You know, hell's coming here. Hell's coming here. It's like, this is it. Just think about it. The most God-fearing, God-loving areas happens to be the areas that you are getting absolutely nuked in biblical ways. What is happening? Start engaging in the act of sodomy now. Save yourselves. Subscribe at the top of the hour when there's a 3-minute ad break.
Pretty toasty. Phoenix is hotter than anywhere else, but in Florida, temperatures don't need to be as high for it to become dangerous because it's also humid there. That makes it harder for the body to cool itself by sweating. If we take a look at the combined risk of
Lero
all
Bang,
these
thank you for the
climate
5 gifted.
impacts, we start to see how different regions will fare. And the Southeast will pretty clearly bear the brunt of climate change. And now let's add back in the data we looked at earlier, but this time for the riskiest 10% of counties. At this point, we're beginning to get a clearer picture of some places you might want to think twice about before moving. But are we really any closer to determining the single riskiest place in the country? Perhaps we need to take a look at this issue from a different angle. We reached out to Hannah Hess from the Rhodium Group's Climate Impact Lab, where
this video debunks the natural earth changes in temperature bullshit. How ancient ice proves climate change is real. Yeah, guess what, dude? If I wanted more Chi-Com propaganda from the People's Broadcasting Socialism Network, okay, I would be watching the People's Broadcaster of Socialism Network already, okay? It's called Chi-Com propaganda. Look it up.
they study how climate change will affect humans across a variety of categories, including death rates and the amount of time someone can spend on the job working due to temperature.
So what we're looking at on this map is how workers in high-risk industries like construction or agriculture or manufacturing being exposed to higher temperatures during the workday causes them to have to shift their time.
This might mean starting their workday later or ending it earlier, or taking more frequent breaks.
Or none of the above, just eat it. You know what I mean? Which is what we're going with. Or changing the labor workforce dramatically. How? Making them younger. Their bones are more brittle, but they heal faster. There are demands from our capital owners that children survive extreme weather conditions, extreme temperatures specifically. I've tested it out. My child, totally fine. You know, she's a little slow now, but hey, totally fine, okay? Being slow is actually a benefit. Doesn't ask any questions when told to do things, okay? More durable than ever.
Certain places that already see these temperature extremes more frequently are better adapted and more equipped to deal with elevated temperatures in the future.
In a place like, for instance, Florida is a good example. Workers are already relatively well adapted to this heat. A lot of people have air conditioning. A lot of people have figured out ways to cope with extreme heat.
And even though Florida tops the list for hurricanes, these disastrous storms are actually pretty rare in any given location. So maybe we can find an even riskier place.
In contrast, Southern California, Southern Arizona, Texas, a lot of those areas get really, really hot. And one of the highest risk places in this data set is Phoenix, Arizona.
And you might be surprised by just how much the heat there is projected to impact people's ability to work, damaging the city's economy.
An individual worker by the end of the century is projected to spend 78 hours less on the job each year.
So if you put that in the context of a company with, say, 200 full-time workers, that would mean 15,600 lost hours each year. But working hours lost isn't the only important metric for Phoenix to consider. According to the UNDP website, under a moderate greenhouse gas scenario, Phoenix would see an increased death rate of 79 mortalities per 100,000 people from climate change by the end of the century. And to put this into perspective, traffic accidents cause 15 deaths per 100,000 people. So we're talking...
Got to get those numbers up. Just saying. The traffic fatalities, I mean, it's like they're not very competitive in the marketplace of fatalities in Phoenix, in Arizona.
About 1/5 the number of deaths. And under a high emission scenario, the number of deaths that Phoenix would see is projected to be nearly twice that number, at 148. And the ProPublica study from earlier also projects that under that same high emission scenario, by mid-century, Phoenix could see temperatures in excess of 95 degrees for around half the year. So when you add up all of Phoenix's different vulnerabilities to
95 degrees for half the year. Oh my God. I mean, you know, you see devastating effect of climate change on a massive populated area. I see tropical destination. That means summer more than half the year. Hello? What's the problem with that? I'm just saying. Could be fun.
Extreme heat that we've discussed so far, it begins to sound like it might just be the most hazardous.
Like a phoenix rising through the ashes. Silver lining, guys. I am a positive influence on the world, so I'm seeing the positive outcome of 95-degree temperature more than half of the year in a place like Phoenix.
Hazardous place to live in the United States due to climate change, or at least near the top of the list. And another interesting thing about Phoenix and the surrounding county of Maricopa is that it's also one of
an electric company in Arizona turned off a lady's power over $50 and she died. What the fuck? Oh my God. That is fucking insane.
the fastest growing places in the country. And this means even more people in harm's way and more difficulty adapting to the growing challenges of climate change. But as we mentioned back in the beginning of this episode, when you look at moving trends across the US, the weird thing is Phoenix isn't that weird. Among the 20 fastest growing US metropolitan areas, you'll recognize many of the places we've already discussed because of their climate risks. And almost none of them are in the least risky regions. But to figure out why people are moving to the most hazardous locations, let's start by taking a closer look at why they're choosing to leave.
The answer is Americans are stupid, okay? No taxes, and also because Americans are dumb. That's it. Because good means bad and bad means good, okay? That's what it is. That's what it is. Ironic, because a lot of the motherfuckers that live there are like, how do I get out of this shithole? Oh my God. For the most part. And these guys are like rushing. They're like, oh my God, it's so sick. I love paying no fucking taxes. Let me build a house directly on top of the water. Okay?
Leave the safest ones.
People are leaving these climate resilient areas for economic reasons. On the one hand, you have people leaving because of affordability. They're leaving the West Coast or the East Coast, these coastal markets where home prices have gone up very dramatically. People would love to live in the most climate resilient areas. Like San Francisco, for example, has a very moderate temperature. It doesn't really have risks from hurricanes or drought or anything like that. But people are being forced out of that area into more wildfire risky areas
Yeah, a big part of the issue is housing, though.
inland California because of the lack of housing. So yeah, people care about it, but money ultimately is the number one motivator, just being able to afford a home in the first place.
In fact, the top 5 cities in population outflow are all extremely expensive coastal towns. Another especially safe region is the Midwest or Rust Belt, but people are leaving there for a totally different reason.
It's not because housing isn't affordable there. People in the Midwest are leaving due to a lack of economic opportunity because they can't find jobs that pay enough for them to have the standard of living that they want. So they go to places with more economic prosperity.
And what does it say about our country that people are having to move to riskier and riskier places instead of away from them? Jesse Keenan focuses on finding answers to problems like these, and his research shows that a big part of the solution comes down to information.
Our brains are there to run out of the way when a bus is heading our direction or a tiger is running to eat.
Nope. My man, you did too much college. Like, these people did too much college. They read books and shit. Like, it makes no sense. They're like, whoa, I don't get it. Like, why aren't people moving away from the bus? Motherfucker, people are like, the bus is not there, libtard. Shut the fuck up. You're fake and gay and a nerd. I don't want to hear from you. That's what's going on. Heck, people are like saying, no, ride the bus faster. Come at me faster, bus. I'll take it on.
Us, right? We're not physiologically oriented for slow violence and incremental notions of risk. So we're just from the get-go impaired in our ability to understand the accumulation of risk. The more information that consumers have access to, the greater likelihood it is going to have that they are going to
Yeah, I mean, literally, we just saw an island burn down and people are like, lasers did it. Chinese lasers must have done this. So like, I get what he's trying to say. It's something that I've talked about quite a bit, which is that climate change doesn't happen overnight. So the ecological disasters that follow as a consequence of anthropogenic climate change happen like a slow burn. Temperatures rising, water levels rising as a consequence of that. This happens over the course of many, many years. And therefore, it's not like immediately tangible, except there are very tangible externalities that you can see and feel, like fucking Florida. Look at Florida. It's underwater all the time, okay? And yet, people still look at those tangible externalities and go, something different. It's not, it's whatever. I got a pool. Got an outdoor pool and indoor pool in my house, which is cool. I wanted the beachfront property. Now the beach has come inside of my house. I see no problem with this.
Shift their behavior accordingly.
The availability of this kind of long-term hazard information is crucial. And according to Redfin's data, it is making a difference.
We did find an effect that people who were previously viewing extremely risky homes in terms of flood risk went on to make offers on homes with half the risk once they saw that information. So it seems like it is having a tangible impact on customers. The most important thing we can tell people is just to prepare. And by preparing, we may be able to avoid a lot of the damage, because if a lot of homeowners see that they have really high flood risk, maybe they'll start to mitigate ahead of time.
Yeah, if life hands you lemons, make lemonade. If the ocean is in your house, you now have an indoor pool. It's all about mindset. Yeah. I'm manifesting that the fucking my half flooded home is actually now an indoor pool that I can swim in and have fun. It's really good for my daily my life was way too sedentary before my house had an indoor pool.
Or they'll even band together and ask their local government to do something about preparing for climate change.
So now that we've really dug into the data on different climate risks across the country, what can we say about the riskiest place of all? Well, when you factor in all of the risks that we've talked about, Florida, Louisiana, Texas, and the California-Arizona border look like places you should think twice about before moving to. But according to the ProPublica study, there is one county that comes out on top: Beaufort County, South Carolina. This county is at risk of nearly all of the natural hazards, including a couple that...
I'm telling you, they're not doing enough butt fucking, okay? Let me tell you, Beaufort, get those numbers up.